Hi, my name's Steven.
Hi, I'm April.
This is the 3 Pi Squared ABA Business Leaders Podcast, where we discuss topics on how to create and grow an ethical and sustainable ABA practice.
Together, Steven and I owned a 7-figure ABA practice that provided both clinic and in-home services.
3 Pi Squared has helped over 900 ABA practices start up and expand with our comprehensive products and services geared specifically to ABA. Now, let's get to the podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to ABA Business Leaders Podcast, brought to you by 3 Pi Squared. I'm April.
I'm Steven.
And today with us, we have a very special guest. I am so excited. I get to say this almost every podcast recording that we have a guest, because I just love anyone who's willing to come on and discuss all things ABA, right? And so I feel like all of our guests are super special, but I've been especially excited for this conversation with Adam. We've met we've met before, coming on air, and we've had some really great conversations. A lot of our values are aligned, and I'm just super excited about this conversation coming up. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Adam Ventura. And he is an entrepreneur. He is in leadership. He's written books. He's published. He's been a professor. He's so much. What have you not done, Adam? So welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephen, April, and April. Thank you for that great introduction. Yes, I feel like that's been the claim to fame throughout my career, is that I didn't really focus on one thing. I got to work on a variety of different projects in different settings. I always like to say that I've worked in every setting imaginable that a behavior analyst could work in. So I've had a pretty exciting career up to this point, I would say.
That's so great. I actually read on your LinkedIn account that you started as an entrepreneur when you were 7 years old, selling, was it rocks? And
Nice.
I could so relate, because that is our son. And so I'm so excited. I'm like, okay, we've got to get Adam and Willis, and he's only 10 years old, but we're like, we've got to get them together for coffee or chocolate milk or something, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I have to qualify that really quickly. I always had an interest in that. And, I went to my parents and I said, I want to start a business. And they said, well, and I think they just wanted me out of their hair at that time. And they're like, well, you're free to start one if you want. So we were living in a condo building at the time. And inside the condo building, they had those decorative rocks, those smooth rocks that you see sometimes at like a doctor's office in a plant. So I grabbed like 20 of them, and my friend and I hired somebody. Nice. My friend and I used crayons, and we colored on the decorative rocks. And then we created a box and where we put them on top of, and we put them right on the side of the street. And I would go and stop cars as they were coming by, and I would ask them if they wanted to buy a decorative rock for 25 cents. And I think the first day that we did it, we made like $8.50 or something like that, which meant that, I sold like 30 rocks. So I felt like it was a successful venture early on.
I love that. Yeah. What was it last summer? Our son sold over a year old Halloween candy and then water from the hose into like little Dixie cups. And he made $27 in like one afternoon. And he had his little neighborhood buddies, and he had said he was going to pay them. And so we had to have a conversation about like, okay, what is it that you're going to pay them? Right. Cause I think he was going to like hand everyone a quarter, Yeah. Anyways, fun times. I love that. I love the creativity, and I love that you have not lost that creativity. Yeah. I think that's amazing. Well, speaking of which, like, tell us a little. So, today, everyone, like we're going to be talking about AI. It's going to be the main focus of our conversation. And I know that is like huge, hot topic in general in the world today. But we're going to be looking at it in the sense of ABA. And, I think there's a huge spectrum of how people feel about that. Like, oh, I'm scared, nope, not doing it. And yeah, I'm already using it. Let's go, to everything in between. And so, of course, within our field, we have to look at like the ethics. We have to look at how we're doing it. And Stephen has really had quite a few conversations recently on social media. And I know Stephen's going to have a lot to say about this, but first, tell us a little bit about Intraverbal AI and kind of what led you to get that going, and a little bit about what it is.
Thank you for asking. So maybe about 3 years ago, we had the big AI moment in society. It was, I think, October, November of 2022 when OpenAI, the parent company of ChatGPT, released ChatGPT, and everyone kind of had a sense of what AI was and how it worked. But the key point about that moment in time was that OpenAI did a great job of keeping the how high of a performance their product had a big secret. And when they released it, even people in the community didn't realize how far ahead they were. So that was kind of one component. The other component is they're using something called natural language processing, and it allows us to see in real time the machine, quote unquote, thinking. And it just kind of amazed everyone. And when that happened, I've been working with a software development team for about a decade. I've been working with the same folks for a very long time. And I sat down and had a conversation with them. And I said, where do you think technology is going, broadly speaking? How is this going to affect our industry, behavior analysis? And we talked a lot about how we could offer value to the behavior analysis community. I feel like my professional mission is to help move the science and practice of behavior analysis forward. And we had a discussion about how we could do that with technology and how we could do that with AI. So the original idea was I wanted to create an immortality project. I wanted to bring as much of the behavior analysis information as I could into one place and allow people to access it quickly. Because realistically, if you're a practicing behavior analyst and you're working at a clinic or a client's home, you're not going to be able to bring with you 30 binders worth of journal articles with you. It's just not practical. And if you're a scientist or an academic, you still have to search painstakingly through all of these different publishers' websites so that you can get to the information that you want. So I wanted to find a way to capture all of this information in one place and hold on to it for posterity and make sure that people 50 years from now can access articles from 50 years ago, so that seminal articles in our field, seminal information in our field remained evergreen and people could access it forever. So I went through the painstaking task of reaching out to journal publishers and setting up licensure agreements with those publishers. And we were successful with some, a couple of them we weren't. But we set up agreements with them so that behavior analysts could access our system and ask questions to literally tens of thousands of journal articles and get basically immediate answers. So that was kind of the foundation of what we wanted to do. We wanted to create information access and make sure that that information was available to all behavior analysts for as long as possible. Does that make sense so far? Mm-hmm. Okay, very cool. And then, so we saw that as kind of our base product. And then we wanted to build on top of that. So over the course of the last 6 months to a year, really, we've been building other tools on top of that. We developed an assessment tool. We developed a supervision tool. And these tools are designed really to help out not just ABA practitioners, but the companies that they work for. So we try to solve everyday problems that ABA companies have. And I'll use the assessment as an example. So assessments, we did some surveys about a year ago, and we found that assessments usually take, if they're done well, behavior analysts communicated to us that they take about 18 to 20 hours to do on average. Some people took more time, some people took less time. And then we surveyed the companies and said, on average, how many hours do you get approved from the insurance companies to do these assessments? And the answer was about 8 to 10. So there was a delta of like 10 hours between the two, and that slack is always picked up by the companies. So we developed an assessment tool using our evidence base as a platform, as a foundation, and we developed a tool that helps do pre-assessment summaries based on diagnostic information, old assessments, old reauthorizations, sends a summary to the behavior analyst before they go in to do the interviews during the indirect assessment. Our system transcribes the entire indirect assessment, interviews, the rating scales, the checklist, the whole bit. It allows them to have access to the literature so they can literally press a button during the interview and say, based on this interview up to this point, what questions have I not asked yet that the literature says that I should? And it gives them some information. We do the same thing or something similar for the direct assessment piece in collecting data. And then at the end, our system, based on all of that information, the pre-assessment documentation, the indirect assessment and the direct assessment, generates what we like to call an insurance-ready report. And then it allows the behavior analyst to step in and make the final adjustments. And that kind of brings me full circle. Our part of our mission at Intraverbal AI is obviously to improve the science and practice of behavior analysis, but we consider the meaning of AI in ABA not to be artificial intelligence, but to be augmented intelligence. Our systems solve problems, but they don't do the work for the behavior analysts. We make sure that the behavior analyst is involved every single step of the way. Now, are there certain things that behavior analysts shouldn't focus as much of their time on, like sitting there furiously scribbling notes while they're trying to have a discussion and build rapport and a relationship with the families? Maybe they don't need to do that. We have lots of technology that takes care of it. But should they be putting their stamp on the report at the end? Of course. Should they be making the report their own? Should they be building the relationship with the kiddo and with the family and with the teachers? Yes. And what we try to do is facilitate that process. And instead of them spending 20 hours on the assessment process, they can spend the 6, 7, 8 that they actually get approved, and it's more meaningful.
So the augmentative intelligence part really got me, right? Versus like how we typically think of AI, because that's some conversations that Stephen and I have been having is, you know, at what point does it start to be, and I'm sure this is what you're going to jump on, I'm sure, but like, at what point, like, is the BA not doing the work, right? And how do we, you know, I'm just going to throw it to Stephen because I know this is one of his big questions that he's been talking about.
I'm going to butcher her name. So do you mind?
Husji and Yen.
Yes. So there was a paper delivered by Husji and Yen, RJ Yin, talking about there's no universal accepted standard for ABA intensive, right? It seems like it's a lot of guesswork involved, or they can't quite nail down how they made that decision. And so this is my concern about AI, right? Like, so I believe that the average experience of a BCBA in the field right now is 3 years. And so if we hand this over and say, okay, AI, it's your job now, I feel especially when these systems start to come, and they're already starting all in one. So, hey, if I just tell this person, get 2 more hours, 25 is good, but if we get 28, that's 10% more revenue. And we, you know what I mean? And so my concern is that maybe we don't really know what's under the hood. We don't know what the incentive structure is of the AI, but the AI is just so good at it that we just say, all right, we give it up. And then we lose that knowledge base of like, can I make an educated decision anymore? Or is it like what was already a difficult task and a lot of guesswork and, a lot of gut maybe feeling involved. And now we've given it to AI and now we can't do it at all. And again, with that level of experience in the field already, that's my biggest concern is, I likened it to Walmart the other day. Like, Walmart will come in, they'll lower their prices and then they're beating all these like mom and pop shops and everybody's like, wow, it's like, 20% cheaper. I'm going to go. And then over time, they would just gradually increase the prices. So, now you go to Walmart because you're going to save money, but like the prices are now, they match. And so they've gotten you to come over. And so this is my concern about AI is like, we're going to slowly warm up the and now it's not really about the clinical decisions anymore. It's about, hey, if we tell them to do 5 more hours, we're going to get, 15% more billing revenue. So let's go ahead and do that. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And a lot of points in there, and I want to try to address, and I'll address one, and we can kind of go back and forth. That you brought up so many critical points there, Stephen. So I'll start with the authorized hours. And something dawned on me when we started working on the clinical piece of this, especially like our assessment that generates a treatment plan at the end. I take that back. It generates the foundation of a treatment plan. And we really ask the behavior analysts at the end to review everything, put their own information in there. We've gone back and forth about whether or not we should put in recommendations in reference to hours at the end. That has been a constant discussion that we've had. And what's interesting, I'll just give you a little bit of feedback on this that we've received. Smaller companies do not want us to put the recommended hours. Large companies do.
100%. That is not a surprise. Yeah.
It isn't. And we should have thought of that originally, and then we weren't sure. So that's gone through a lot of iterations as we've had like a ton of beta testers and the community has given us feedback. But one of the things that dawned on me is that we're not the only ones that are going to be using AI. The insurance companies are going to do this as well. Now, Medicaid, that may take 20 years because that's a whole nother discussion for another podcast. But the insurance companies are going to be on the ball with this, and they're going to be using their own AI as well. And I'm sure that they're using systems that are AI-like right now to make some of those decisions. I know some insurance companies just use reviewers. On that note, what we did with our system is we contracted about 7 or 8 peer reviewers that work at the insurance companies, like BCBAs that work as peer reviewers, and we had them check our assessments. And we even created like a scorecard for each one of them for the reports and said, number 1, would you approve this? Number 2, how do you feel about the acquisition section? How do you feel about the reduction section? So on and so forth. And they gave us feedback, and we sent it back and forth to them for a few months until we got it into a better place, to the point where they would say on every trial, so to speak, yes, I would approve this. And they were just tweaking little things. So that would be the first thing that I would say, is that the insurance companies are going to be using these tools as well. More broadly speaking, I can think of very few fields that are as human as ABA is. The way that I've been describing it, talking about this on different podcasts, is I think that you need a human to teach another human how to be a better human. And I think that's the essence of applied behavior analysis, at least human applied behavior analysis, because I know, we work with animals as well. But I think you need humans to do that for a lot of different reasons. Like, I've seen all the videos. I've interacted with some of the robots at conferences, and they're just not going to have a lot of the nuanced facial expressions and micro behaviors that human beings are going to have. And if I was a parent of a child with special needs, I don't want them working with a robot. I want them working with another human being, because that's the whole point of the service. Is social skills is such a huge part of what we do. We talk about the goals of ABA therapy, one of the goals being mainstreaming kids, getting them to interact successfully with other kids their own age, and things like that. So I think that there's a human element that we're never going to lose. Now, the other thing I would say is, I think skill sets are going to have to change. And I want to give, this is one example that I've been giving almost everywhere, and I feel very passionately about. So right now, I don't know if you all have seen, but there's been a lot of discussion about AI in school, specifically at universities. And a lot of professors are very frustrated. I taught at university, at Florida International University, for over a decade. And you always have to spend a little time making sure that students are behaving ethically. They're not cheating. And now, with the advent of ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity and Grok, students can access answers almost immediately. And there's a lot of frustration on the part of the professors. So the way that I see this is, in education, for example, and behavior analysis, or ABA, is education adjacent. In education, throughout history, education has been primarily intraverbal training. And what I mean by that is, we teach students to get the right answers. Really, throughout history, that's been what we do. Outside of doctoral programs or graduate programs in general, where, people have to decide on thesis and dissertation questions, that sort of thing. For the most part, quizzes, exams, whether they're oral, paper, or whatever, we ask a question and they have to give an answer. However, since the point of education is to provide students with skills that will best serve them as they move out into the community, out into society, I think education is going to have to fundamentally change from teaching students to get the right answers to teaching them to ask the right questions, because they're going to be interacting with these devices at every job. And this is the promise that I'll make to everyone. 30 years from now, every single professional human being, regardless of job or industry, we will all have the same job description, and that will be prompt engineer. Every single one of us will need to know how to know what we want and ask for what we want, whether we're working at Burger King or a hospital or GameStop or a movie theater or a toy store or a financial firm or an accounting firm. We're going to need to know what we want and how to ask these systems for that. So I think education is going to have to shift. And on that note, I think ABA is going to have to shift a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does. I haven't quite thought of it in that sense. Definitely thought about it in 30 years that it's going to be here and beyond, right? As we have questions with our curious little 10-year-old who is constantly asking us about, because he's very, this is their, this generation was born with computers and iPads and smartphones, and he knows no different, right? And then especially through the COVID years, right, where he was kindergarten online, right? And so this is just part of it. And he asked us questions. He asked Steven the other day. He said, "Daddy, was your TV black and white when you were little? Right. And then he's like, what do you think when my kids ask me that question? What do you think I'm going to say? Do you think we'll have TVs anymore? You know, like that. And so like taking that curiosity and applying it to this, and that is not, this is not the outlook of 30 years with AI that was in my thought process. Right. But that makes a great point, because we're not going to need to know those information. We're not going to need to like memorize those facts, because we're going to have them at our fingertips.
Yeah, I guess I'm just feeling like an old man on the lawn, right? Saying, get off my lawn, right? On the porch. I just, and maybe this is just what happens when you get older, but my concern is like, are we going to lose something with this, right? Maybe we don't. Maybe we gain from it.
But
mostly.
Maybe we lose and we gain.
Maybe. I guess like, again, you know, just going back to that concern about like, where are we going to know what is motivating, if we can even call it that, the AI system, right? Are we going to know what is in the back making these decisions? And if we lose that decision-making skill ourselves, what happens then, right? And yeah, I mean, that's more moral, and maybe this isn't the conversation for that, but like that is definitely something that's on my mind all the time. Even myself, like I can't Google anymore, right? Like I go into ChatGPT, and because I'm gonna get better results, it's gonna be easier, it's gonna be quicker, and so have I lost that skill? Does it even matter if I've lost that skill? You know what I mean? Like it's it certainly makes you think.
Yeah, no, and I think that those are important discussions to have. And I would say a couple of things. I think number one, I think you need to know things to ask things. So I think we still need to learn things. We need to learn things so that we know things so that we can ask things. Sure. And these large language models, these chat interfaces that we interact with, they work best when you iterate. So you don't just ask one question, you ask a string of questions. So you ask, you know, what is this? And it gives you an answer. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Well, could you dive a little bit deeper into this? So there's a lot of back and forth that we do there. But Stephen, what you were bringing up with regards to skills, I think is so important, because I think when technology hits, when a big technological transformation like this hits, you think throughout history, the big things like the printing press or the plow or the internet, computers, things like that. Yes, there's some skills that we lose, but then there's other skills that we gain. On that note, I do want to say a quick thought, because I've been thinking about this a lot, about thinking. So I think when you write, I think writing is a formalized version of thinking. So the example I like to give is when I write an abstract for a conference, let's say that that's about 150, 200 words, something like that, right? And I'll rewrite that abstract, I don't know, 15, 20 times before I submit it, literally. So I'll write one sentence, I'll sit back, I'll read it, change a couple of words. I'll write the second sentence, sit back, read both sentences, change a few words. And then I do this iterative process through all, 6, 7, 8 sentences, to the point where, especially with the first few sentences, I've rewritten them 3 or 4 times. And I see that as actually the process of thinking. So I have a general idea of what I want to talk about at the conference, but as I write the abstract and rewrite each sentence over and over and over again, I'm developing out my thoughts on this, and I'm teaching myself how to think about this topic. So just by the time I get done with the abstract, I have a really good sense about what I want to talk about it, because I've thought about it deeply. And I think that that's one of those important skills that we can't lose when we interact with LLMs and large language models. So for example, if I go and use ChatGPT, let's say, to come up with, one of the other examples I like to give is I use ChatGPT as a creative tool to help me come up with names for projects. However, I'll say, I want to work on this project. Give me 10 names, and I'll give it different parameters for this particular project. It'll give me 10 names. And I've done this for at least over the course of the last 2 years, 20, 25 projects. Out of those hundreds of options that it's given me, I've never once used an example that it gave me. However, it introduced me to a new way to think about the project name. So I'm like, oh, I didn't think that I could use a compound word here, or I didn't think that I could do a play on words like this. And then it helped me think of another way to name the project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah. I guess and the last point I'll make on this is, with BCBAs especially, well, even techs, but BCBAs are going to be making the decisions on hours, right? And so they're already, like you said, right? I have 6 assessments to do this week. That's 120 hours. So they're already so overworked in many situations that I don't know, are they going to have that opportunity to say, yeah, I'm going to use this as kind of a muse almost, but I'm not going to actually take this information and use it. I think that my concern, and again, maybe I'm wrong here, but it's like the path of least resistance, right? Hey, we made them 50% more productive. What else can I give them, right? And so I would assume that their job is not going to get easier. It's just this is going to lessen. And so, are they going to, take that, or are they just going to copy and paste it? And, I think the other thing at the same time, right, my competing argument is, dude, they're already going in ChatGPT, right? They're already using it. I can 100% guarantee that. I've said this on many podcasts, but I would please, if you're a business owner right now, an ABA business owner, just do an anonymous poll. Say, are you using ChatGPT or not? Right? Because it's not HIPAA compliant. So we need to make sure that we're using the right systems to help with treatment plans, or maybe you're putting your session notes in ChatGPT just to make sure you don't have any spelling errors, you don't have any grammar errors, right? And then you're copying and pasting them back into the system. We need a way that people can use this safely, securely. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I'm really glad you brought that up as well. And that was part of the argument that I was making about education is I don't think that it's useful to try to stop people from using these systems. I think the key is to create systems that that are in line with the science and practice of behavior analysis, and that solve common problems like the HIPAA problem. So you were alluding to PHI and making sure, I think most people at this point understand that you can't plug PHI or progress notes or treatment plans into ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or any of these systems. So that's part of what we did at Intraverbal AI, and I know some other companies are doing the same, where we created a HIPAA compliant environment. And what we tried to do with our system, or what we did, was we created a system that actually removes the PHI before anything is processed. And we like to think that that's one of the elements that makes our system a little bit different from some of the others, is we have technology in there that actually removes names and date of births and addresses and social security numbers and that sort of thing before anything is processed. And then it reinserts that information before the answers are provided, so that we can provide a seamless experience. But yeah, to your point, I think fighting this technology, I don't know how useful that would be. I think the most important thing is that if I could lend a recommendation to some of the ABA therapy business owners out there, and I owned an ABA therapy business for almost 10 years. We had just under 300 employees when I sold my business. So I know a lot of the heartache that they go through. If I was an ABA business owner, I would make sure to look out into the landscape of ABA and identify the companies that are doing it right. So what we try to do is we try to do two things with every tool we develop at Intraverbal. Number one, we do good behavior analysis. That's where connecting to the journal articles comes in. We always try to encourage good behavior analysis thinking. So Stephen, to your point from earlier, we want to make sure that behavior analysts don't lose those skill sets. We just augment them, we enhance them by taking care of some of the more menial tasks. But we also solve a problem too, because it's one thing to spend 2 hours on creating a treatment plan report. It's something else to spend 10, and I think last thing I'll say really quickly is I think a lot of the fundamental tasks of applied behavior analysis are going to shift. And I'll use just one quick example, data collection.
Yeah.
There's some really cool companies out there that are using an AI technology called computer vision, where they're able to scan an environment, a video environment, and identify behaviors that are occurring in those environments and collect data on it. So what I think that means for behavior analysts is behavior analysts are going to shift, for example, from being data collectors to being experts in IOA. So they're going to step back and say, instead of me furiously collecting data, I'm going to step back and look at the data that the AI systems have collected and say, is that what we were hoping to collect? Does that represent the operational definitions that I put into the behavior program? So we're going to be doing a lot more analysis and a lot less administrative work, I think, over the course of the next 5 to 10 years.
That's so cool. That the idea of that, like my beginner self back in the early 90s, if I would have thought that I would ever be able to not have to take data and have is some other system do that for me?
I mean, I guess like that would be the ideal world, right? Where it makes a human field more human, right? Because we really have been pulled away from working with people face to face. Your head is down in an iPad, making sure that you get the right data, you put the right session note in. No, sorry, I don't have time to talk to you, parents. I have to clock out and I have to, right? So I that would be wonderful, right? But this is where the pessimistic side of me comes in, right? Is like, what guardrails are we putting in place to make sure that that is the actual outcome and not something a little bit, I don't know, a little bit more nefarious, a little bit more hidden underneath, right? So I'm sure that's the conspiracy side of me talking, but at the same time, right? Like it seems like it could be very easy for something like that to happen. But yeah, I totally agree. We had I can't remember who we had on, but that was their point of view too, right? It's going to reduce those things that no one wants to do, that are really taking away from the field, not adding. So
yeah, Amanda Rowson with Noetic, and we've also spoken with Michael Gao, and I mean, and that's a really exciting thing. I think to counterbalance your pessimism with some optimism here is how many leaders in the field are taking this and saying, okay, this is here. It's not even it's coming, but it's here, and how can we do this ethically? How can we do this safely? How can we do this and improve quality services? How can we be more human, right? Like what do we need in place, and what skills do we need to learn? And kind of to switch gears a second, we were talking with a panel this morning and talking about soft skills, and that I've had quite a few conversations that have come up more recently about how we feel like that's one of the areas that we need to provide more education and training in for our staff are those soft skills. And at the same time, we have this big concern about session notes, and we're putting together a big session note training thing. So part of my research in that is to reach out to techs and BCBAs and owners and say, okay, what is it that has you so scared? Like, what's the driving force here behind, like, you wanted to improve your session notes? Well, like, I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't looked at all the data yet, but like, I would say 80% is fear of audit.
It's probably 95%.
Maybe higher.
Right?
Yeah. And so that brings me around to this. It was like, okay, well, if you're not concerned about your session notes because you're not concerned about them being, a good indicator of what kind of services that you're giving and where the success of your learners and all the clinical pieces, that the whole reason we're here in this field for, but instead it's that I'm not going to dot all the I's and cross all the T's in the way that the payer wants me to, and therefore, I could owe a bunch of money. And so I'm making all these connections right now and thinking, okay, I see it. I see this is where, the AI can help with the administrative piece and take out that fear or lessen the fear of, a recoupment audit because the session note wasn't quite right, and we can focus more on how we're delivering services and if we're really look at the nitty-gritty clinical stuff, like, are we
well, it's the same
providing, like, are we working on the programs that we want to be working on? Are we keeping up to date with, like, the progress and all of that face-to-face stuff?
It would be the same with the assessment too, right? Like, I think that sure, it's for, helping the child get a better quality of life or, work on skills that they could use. But I think if you asked most clinicians, why are you writing this assessment?
It's for insurance.
So I can get my hours approved. Right. And so and the justifications and I have to work on this many targets, or I have to have this many goals for every hour that I ask for in the request. And so, yeah, you are having to jump through hoops, and how much of that hoop jumping is taking from actually helping your client, right? And teaching your staff.
Yeah, absolutely. And April, I love that shift there to more positive. And I'd actually like to use this as an opportunity to talk about the session notes dilemma that you both were just mentioning. So
sure.
I agree. I feel like doing progress notes is almost 100% negatively reinforcing. Mm-hmm. They're trying to avoid getting in trouble. So that's kind of the general, everybody wants to avoid getting in trouble. The techs want to avoid getting suspended or fired or not getting paid. Same with BCBAs or losing their certification or licenses, and companies want to prevent that as well. And I think what this technology can do is it's going to allow us to shift from negative reinforcement contingencies to positive reinforcement contingencies. So if we think about negative reinforcement, you do just enough to not get punished. Where with positive reinforcement, that's where discretionary effort comes in, where you go, as Aubrey Daniels talked about, you go above and beyond. And I think so many of our our tasks that we do on a regular basis as BCBAs are going to shift. So I talked about data collection to IOA. I think the same is going to happen with parent training. So we're going to shift from parent training to parent support to highlight what you were talking about, April, with soft skills. Same thing with supervision. So we're about to release our supervision tool. I think supervision, it's interesting because I was just talking about the negative reinforcement components of progress notes. There's a lot of those same contingencies involved with the BACB. Supervisors don't want to lose their certification or get suspended or sanctioned. So if we can take care of the administrative part, BCBAs will shift from being supervisors to coaches, to mentors, so that they can work on that human level and they can share their experience. And I know that's something that AI can't do right now and won't be able to do for a very long time, is the individual experience of each BCBA. They can bring that into their work, whether it's supervision, assessments, parent support, whatever it is, they can bring their unique history of conditioning into the situation. And that's going to be the value add of BCBAs moving forward. And to be honest with you, that feels like more of the work that people are hoping that they do when they enter the field. Like, nobody wants to do a progress note. Nobody wants to spend 10 hours writing a treatment plan and making sure that everything is perfect. Otherwise, that poor child won't get the hours that they need. So I think, and I don't want to paint a totally rosy picture, because we definitely, as you pointed out, Stephen, we need to set up those guardrails. But what I've learned, and I've been in the field for 20 years, is I like that old adage that, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And when I got into the field, the issue was cookie cutter programs. And people, we've all seen them, unfortunately. People just take a template, they copy it over. When I first became a supervisor and I'd see the exact same behavior definition for like 3 clients, and it was really demoralizing when you'd see the same definition, not only across 3 clients, but across 3 BCBAs, which meant that they were colluding and copying and pasting. So it's definitely more the possibilities for cheating now across the board, whether it's education or business or wherever, are more robust. But I think that society will meet that task head on. And I think that's why we have these discussions, so we can talk about the nuances of what's changing, what will change, and how we can prevent it.
I mean, definitely for me, like, having this conversation is very helpful. And the fact that you are building these things, right, and you're asking these same questions makes me feel pretty good, right? And the fact that you seem to have such a positive outlook on it, I think, is a little reassuring. Still, Terminator 2 is playing in the back of my head all the time, right? Like, all the time, no, right? So, but yeah, no, that's good that you seem to feel that this can be a force for good. So, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I would mention really quickly too is there's a lot of great folks out there that are already working on this problem. So, for example, CASP is already working on ethical guidelines for this. And I want to throw some credit over to some other folks. So Dr. Adrian Jennings is heading up something called, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact title, but it's something like the Ethics of AI and ABA Consortium. And they're putting together some ethics guidelines as well. So as fast as the technology is moving, there's a lot of ethically minded folks that are working out there to make sure that we have these guardrails to ensure that behavior analysts are doing things right. But broadly speaking, I'm pretty optimistic and I'm pretty excited about the potential for how it can help us. I mean, the big first task that we worked on, which was connecting to the literature, and right now, behavior analysts can go into a session in a home in rural America somewhere, and they can bring tens of thousands of journal articles with them and get answers almost immediately. And I think that's amazing. I think that is the promise of evidence-based care that people talk about across scientific disciplines and that we've been discussing for decades that we've never really been able to realize until now. So I know I talk about this all day and, you'll hear the passion in my voice, but I'm pretty excited about where we can go with this.
Yeah, I do love that. And I'm very excited to play around with being able to come up with articles, right? In fact, after our last conversation where you introduced that piece alone of the Intraverbal AI system, there have been, I don't even know, numerous times where I've gone to look for some research and I'm like, oh, that'd be nice. I'm like, all right, Adam, sign me up. But I could see, and I don't do in homework anymore. I'm on the other side of this microphone instead of having conversations, but
I I could see
there's
it definitely
so
levels
much
the playing field.
Well, there's
right?
so much now that is done, like especially for in-home services, right? There's so much that's done is sitting on the floor, crisscross applesauce, like, you know, in the middle of a kid's bedroom or the basement or whatever, right? And you're like, okay, where's our next step? Where do we need to go? And you have to be able to do it on the fly, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times, right? There's no, let me get back to my office. I'll get back to you in 48 biz. I mean, I'm sure there's some of that as well, but like, it really just helps it to be, like you said, like you're able to like bring a whole library and in with you and be able to access that so that if you do need to problem solve something, then you have that evidence-based research or right there to look into. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I'm excited about that.
You sold me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved what you said there, April, too. I'll never forget the very first client that I ever worked with on my own. I wanted, before session started, he had a trampoline outside in the backyard. And before every session, at least when I started with the working with that case, just to establish myself as a conditioned reinforcer, I did whatever it is he wanted to do for the first few days, just to build that rapport. And then it just turned into a thing that before we started working on skills, every day we would go outside. I live in Miami. It's hot death out here. We would go outside and we would jump up and down on the trampoline for 30 or 45 minutes, to get him into a better place. And then we would find a room in the house and we would sit down, like you said, crisscross, and we would start working on skills. And then we would oftentimes move to another area, depending on what was going on. Maybe the dog would come over. We'd interact with the dog. There was a lot of those incidental teaching opportunities. And those are, I think, uniquely human activities.
Yeah.
That it's going to take a very, very long time for that ever to even approach being replaceable, in my humble opinion. So I'm pretty excited about what we will be able to do, especially in the next 5-10 years. I think it's going to be really exciting to see where this technology takes us.
Yeah, we're working with a few, I don't know, what would you say, programmers, leaders, and one of the programmers that we were working with, he's like, the tools that I was using 6 months ago, I can't use anymore because it's changing so quickly.
Oh, you're talking about like the software people that we're working with.
So I'm curious, like, where do you see like the next 2 years? Is it just going to be like the Wild West? Are you seeing any like anybody? Obviously you, but like, are you seeing anyone coming into this space? That's going to be the next Google or the next Microsoft at this moment, or is it kind of open at this moment? Like,
yeah, I think that there's a fundamental problem that anybody working in this space has to solve. So most of the companies like myself and the other players in ABA, AI players, most of us create wraparound programs where we use existing large language models to work with. It's very rare. We do some fine-tuning ourselves and some training of a model ourselves, but ultimately that is an expensive and resource-intensive process. So I would say the biggest challenge that everyone is running into right now are resources and compute. So the amount of computer power required to do a lot of these tasks is astronomical. I mean, if you sit down with the numbers, doing the math, you basically need an AI system to do the math on some of this because it requires so much power to do. So I do think that there's going to be a plateau that we hit over the course of the next few years. And until that compute and power problem is solved, I think we're going to level off for a little while. And gotcha. I follow all of the AI news on a regular basis, and you can get kind of lost in, there's a new update every week, but nobody's solved that central problem yet. And there's only so much energy that we've learned to develop as human beings. So I do think that we're going to hit a wall at some point until we figure out a way either through it or around it.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Is there anything that we missed that you wanted to speak on before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot. I think I'm pretty excited about where AI is going to take us in behavior analysis. And I don't want to pigeonhole this conversation to just the applied side. I think there is so much that we can do with academia as well. So I've got some great partnerships that I set up, and I'm going to plug one of them really quickly or a couple of them as an example here. So we've partnered with ABA España to do some research on whether or not systems like ours with the journal articles will help improve learning outcomes of the students in their graduate program. We've also partnered with folks like Patrick and Clelia at Learning Behavior Analysis on developing BACB test prep materials and using this technology within there. So I think that what I tell, or what my developers tell myself and some of our behavior analyst colleagues all the time, is the limitations of these technologies outside of the power problem I discussed. The limitations are really our imagination. So how creative can we be with this technology? And I think it goes beyond just the practice of behavior analysis, but also the science too, running experiments. We're working on helping people do literature reviews. On the academic side, we're helping people study for the BACB exam. We're doing research with graduate students. So I think that there's so much that we can do on both sides, and I don't want to forget about academia because that's really part of the foundation of what we do out there as practitioners.
Excellent. Thank you for including all the parties for sure, because that is something that we don't talk about very much because of what we're doing right now. But it is definitely something that it's necessary. We couldn't be here without that.
Yeah, I mean, the first pass rate could certainly use some help, right? So I would assume that anything on that side could definitely.
Oh yeah, with the.
I mean, not all programs are made equally, and yeah, so I would think that would definitely be. Yeah, I mean that's huge.
It's
right?
all good. Yeah.
I mean that's where does this BCBA come out, right? Where is their foundation, and if you can increase that, that's going to help everybody forever, right? So.
Well, that goes back to solve some of the concerns that you had in the beginning of an inexperienced,
totally.
maybe not has the correct education coming into a role that they're in, relying too heavily on supports and not, thinking through themselves. But if they have that strong education, then there you go.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what you said before, Adam, right? Where it's not memorizing, it's knowing what questions to ask and how to get the information that you need. Yeah. So, all right. Fine.
So many cool things to talk about. I know. I think we can probably talk forever on this.
Absolutely. If I could just say one last thing, because I thought that was so important, April, what you were mentioning there is that's one of the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve with some of the projects that we're working on is the democratization of this technology. We want to get it into as many people's hands as possible. And that's always been, I've been in the field for 20 years. And one of the first questions people would ask me is, where did you go to school? And not everybody gets the opportunity to go to Western Michigan, or North Texas or Columbia Teachers College, some of these preeminent schools. So what this technology does now is it democratizes behavior analysis knowledge and experience in one place. Now, you still need to know how to use it, and you still need to be trained well by these programs, but the folks that maybe go to an online-only program or have to do a program maybe in a different country or in a rural area where they don't have the resources of some of those preeminent university programs, now they have access to this information and they can be better behavior analysts.
So great. All right. How are you? What's your positivity meter?
Yeah, I definitely meter? More positive and more optimistic than when we started. So yeah.
Well, congratulations, Adam. Look what you did.
Success. This talk is success because Stephen is more positive. I'll take that win.
I love it. Love it. Well, we thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation today, because obviously super important conversation to have and an exciting conversation to have, as we're embarking on so many, I don't even know what to say, so many new things, right? Like I was toying with quoting, nerdy movies, but I won't. But anyways, we're so thankful for your time today, and listeners, we're so thankful for your time, and we would love to hear what you think about all of this. Please visit us on Facebook, ABA Business Leaders, and Stephen's on LinkedIn. You'll find all of this in our show notes. Yep. Give us your thoughts.
And if you're interested in Intraverbal AI, it'll be in the show notes. It'll be in the blog. So definitely take a look. I think it'd be worth your time. And thank you again, Adam, for coming on.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, April. It was a pleasure speaking to you both.
Great. Well, everyone, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.
See ya. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Hopefully it was helpful. If you would like to gain access to this entire video, and actually our entire library of videos, please join our ABA Business Leaders membership. You can find that at www.3pisquare.com.